people would do something like that. Not what nationality, what kind of people. That's what researchers mean when they use the term selection. What that means in a nutshell is that the folks who leave a country are not a random handful from that country. They're the ones who made a conscious decision to leave. And it should be noted that they're also the ones who had something going on before they left.
Right.
They had the ambition. They had money. They had the ability to look 10 years into the future and bet on themselves.
They had a higher level of education. That's the most important thing.
So the argument isn't that Nigerians are better than those of us who have been here for centuries. The argument is that the plane they came in on was basically a filtration system that sorted them out before they ever even landed here.
Now, as he's saying this, he sounds pretty much as if he's repeating in different words what I just communicated. But don't worry, he's going to turn around and spin it into some bullshit in just a few minutes.
They were the cream of the crop. And of course, the cream of the crop is usually going to do well. And I venture to say that that's a strong argument, right?
Right, yeah.
It's probably true as far as everything goes.
Yeah.
But perhaps it doesn't actually go far enough.
Really?
And there's two reasons why that might be.
Okay.
A sociologist named Todd Hamilton went looking at Black Americans who migrated from the state they were born in,
right,
and into another state. We're not talking about country-to-country migration here, just state to state. When a Black family that's native to the U.S. packs up out of a place like Detroit and then moves to Charlotte.
Right.
What Hamilton found out about these kinds of families was that those folks have marriage rates and work rates that look very similar to the immigrants. Same patterns.
Okay.
So what does that tell us? It tells us that the family from Nigeria and the family leaving Detroit are doing the same thing.
Right. And if we take a look at various variables among this family leaving Detroit and moving to another, city in a different state, I'm sure you would find similar metrics, okay? In particular, a higher level of education. And so education is the ticket to success in this life, right? If you know better, you do better. Everybody's heard this. And so, yeah, that's not surprising.
Welcome to Sprunky World Online RP. Create your own character, explore lively locations, and dive into non-stop role-playing fun. Chat, play, and adventure together in a vibrant online universe where every choice is yours. Easy to play on phone or computer, totally free, and packed with surprises waiting around every corner. Your story starts now. Play now on playgamer.com.
Production, but I can't outsource my taste. Like, that has to come from the engineer or the creative professional. I'm actually learning now how good of a director am I, actually, because it's going to be crap if I give it a half-hearted direction. It pulls me to something that you write about a lot. Limits of my language really are the limits of my world, except now language does.
One of them needs a passport, but it's the same behavior. Same result. Whatever that plane did to filter and sort the Nigerians, a U-Haul did the same thing for Black Americans moving from state to state. Now, the second possibility matters a little bit more. Those parents from Lagos did well. Their two kids also did pretty well, right? But then those kids grew up and had children of their own. And in that third generation, the grandchildren, they start looking like Black Americans whose family have been here for generations.
Sure.
Crime went up, marriage went down.
Okay.
That's the part that selection can't explain. If the whole thing was that the parents from Nigeria were special, and the grandkids should still be running on the same spectrum.
Now, again, you got to remember, when you come here as an immigrant, you have different incentives. One, you are already pre-selected. You are already someone with no criminal record. The U.S. government is not importing Black criminals from the Caribbean, from Africa, people with a criminal record. It's not happening. It's like an instant disqualification if you have a record in your home country. So there's that already. Also, you're selecting people with a higher level of education. We see this all across the world, whether you take a look at black Americans, whether you take a look at white Americans, if you take a look at anyone anywhere, the higher the level of education, the lower your chances are of ever going to prison, right? And having a criminal record in the first place. And so you're also more than likely somebody who has better developed your critical thinking skills. You make better decisions. You also have more opportunities and will more than likely make more money. And so, okay, so we have these two things already going for you as an immigrant. But then when you move to America, you don't instantly become an American citizen. You are on a green card, and then you have to be here for a period of time, not committing any felonies, right? Being a productive member of society, paying your taxes for several years. It means you have a huge incentive to not commit any crime. Of course, that goes away once you're born here as an American. You don't worry about being deported. You don't worry about having your life completely ruined because you know, drove under the influence or committed some other minor crime. You know, some guy ran his mouth to you and you punched him in the face and committed assault, right? All of these things you have to think twice about when you're here on a green card. You know what I mean? But secondly, we see this in any family. If you put a lawyer and a doctor together and they have 6 children, you think all 6 of those children are going to be lawyers and doctors? No, one of them might be really successful. Another one might be kind of successful. The other 2 might be just doing all right. And then 1 or 2, depending on how many kids they had, right, will be complete fucking deadbeats. One of them living with their parents well into their fucking 30s and 40s, bro. The other one is like the super underachiever. This is what you typically see. And so, yeah, it makes sense that even though you pre-selected for the cream of the crop, as he put it, when importing these people from other countries, yeah, it makes perfect sense that after a generation or 2, you're going to see the normal distribution of like outcomes and behavior in the children. Right? Otherwise, every NBA player's son would be in the NBA if that's how it worked. That's just not how it works. You don't pass on literally like everything to your kids like that. You know what I'm saying? To all your children either.
Fuel. Whatever the parents had, they should have passed it down like anything else you pass down in a family. But 2 generations in, and somehow all of that disappeared.
Another way to debunk this horrible point is just look back at their home country. If you're trying to make the argument that it's a culture thing, then why is the crime rate there worse? You know what I'm saying? Like, you'll see that. You'll see, I've seen disconnected Jamaicans, for instance. I'm a Jamaican, and I love my Jamaican people. But I have spoken to some Jamaican immigrants living in America, and they will criticize black Americans for the crime rate. And then I got to remind them, I was like, nigga, do you forget what shit was like in Jamaica? Bro. Africans do the same thing. So that's all you have to do to debunk this idea that Caribbean or African culture is like superior in terms of discipline, responsibility, and, you know, all of that. All you got to do is go and look at how shit is going on over there. And that's what it is. That's just what it is. But that in of itself is not a commentary on them being inferior to black Americans, right? They have a different set of circumstances.
If we go back to that family that left Detroit for Charlotte, nobody selected them. They didn't have to get interviewed by the U.S. Embassy. They just looked at where they were. They looked at where they figured they could be, and they decided on the second one. That's a decision.
Okay.
It's a behavior. It's not about a country. It's about a choice. And we've got to recognize that's a pretty specific choice. It's the ability to take something painful right now on purpose because you can see something better waiting on the other side. It's people giving up the paycheck they already have for the one they think they can get later. That's a lot. And that's what the plane was filtering for. It's also what the U-Haul was filtering for.
All right.
Same behavior, 2 different vehicles.
Okay.
Now, you might be thinking, this is still a black immigrant story, isn't it? Well, you have to consider that immigrants outperform the native-born in every group in this country. White immigrants get locked up at about 1/5 the rate of white folks who were born here. That's white immigrants compared to white Americans.
Right.
So
Yeah.
consider what that tells us.
Again, though, you're comparing a group of people that were selected for their ability to perform, for their track record in their home country, right? Their education level, the skills they already have, them having no criminal record. You're comparing that to a general population that, of course, is going to span the entire spectrum of people who are degenerates and lazy, all the way up to people who are model members of society and are highly educated and very successful. So it's not fair to compare those two things.
Whatever this is, it isn't specific to black immigrants. It works on everybody in America, which means whatever's driving it was never race to begin with. It was about the choices that people make. And that's good news for us. It may not sound like it right now, but if you think about it, a choice is something we can do something about. There's no genetic flaw that American blacks have that other blacks don't. Whatever these families brought with them, something in this country is wearing it down as generations pass. Now, as per usual, I already see it coming.
Okay, well, if it's unique to this country, why then aren't all the people in the countries that these people, whether they be white immigrants or black immigrants or Indians or Asians, why is it that we don't see all of them being excellent, right? Why don't we see all of them having high levels of education, all of them performing well? Reality is, if that was the case over there, they probably would never leave their country in the first place. Okay? So it's not that these people have something special that black Americans or Americans in general don't have, right? The reality is there are many variables that will dictate how a person performs in this life. And when the government is selecting for immigrants, they select for people who already have those variables that will make it more likely that they will be successful. It's that simple.
Is your dog slowing down? Do they have trouble getting up, walking, or going up the stairs?
That's simple.
Let's go back to that Nigerian kid we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
He's 11. It's his first month in American school. He's always completing his homework because that's the rule in his household. He raises his hand in class because his parents encouraged him to raise his hand.
Okay.
And by that third week, somebody in that school is calling him names. He thinks he's better than everybody else. Why are you always answering all the questions? His classmates give him hell in that classroom.
Right.
The teacher isn't the only one teaching him a lesson here. His classmates are too. Black Harvard researcher Roland Fryer put some numbers to this.
Okay.
He looked at 90,000 students and found that black kids with a grade point average over 3.5 lost friends. They didn't gain any. And that pattern occurred more frequently in mixed or integrated schools. It disappeared in schools that were over 80% black. So the pressure isn't coming from the white kids. That immigrant kid isn't losing white friends over his report card. He's losing black friends.
See, this guy just exposed that he has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. He doesn't even understand what he just said. He's probably reading something that was produced by AI like ChatGPT or Claude, which that in of itself isn't a crime, but he doesn't even understand what he just articulated. So I went and found a study. First and foremost, he's misrepresented. It's not that black students lose friends the higher up their GPA climbs. The way he articulated it, he made it sound like, okay, when you had a 2.8 GPA, you had 15 friends. And as your grades got better, the amount of friends you had reduced. But that's not at all what we see. Here's the actual article that was published, or at least it was made available online in 2009. An empirical analysis of active white by Roland G. Fryer, right, from Harvard University. And here's the data he was talking about. right? So we can see this is your grade point average. Right here we have 1 all the way up to 4.0, right? And what we see is that the popularity of a white person increases with his grade point average. Now, how do they measure popularity? So what they would do is they would go to a student in a school, for instance, and ask that student to write down the names of all of his friends, right? And that's how they figured out how popular you were. It was based on how many other kids wrote down your name as a friend. And so what we would see is typically the higher your GPA as a white kid, the more likely it is that you would be written, your name would be written down by more children, right? And so the idea here is that white culture is a type of culture that encourages you to do well in school, because the better you do in school, the more friends you'll have and the more popular you will be. This is a narrative you will often hear by people trying to disparage the black community by saying the better you do in school, the less popular you will be. Black kids will make fun of you and say that you're acting white. Well, firstly, if we just take a look at the data that we see here, and as he stated, right, around a point where you see 3.5, you do see that children become less popular. But again, it's not that they're losing friends. It's just that they didn't have as many friends, right? If you're a black kid with a GPA of 4.0, you don't have as many friends as a black kid with a 3.4. But what's interesting is you do have the same amount of friends as a kid with a 3.0. So explain that. Why then is the kid with a 3.0 grade average typically as popular as a kid with a 4.0 grade average, if it's just a universal trend that the smarter you get or the better you do in school, the less friends you'll have? That's not what we're seeing here. In fact, we see the kids with the least amount of friends are the ones who do the most poorly in school, right? All we see is like kind of a curve here where your pinnacle is around 3.5 with the black students. Also notice we see the drop off happens a lot earlier for the Hispanic community. It's less than 2.5. We start to see a decrease in the amount of popularity you have if you're a Hispanic person. Yet that's not a narrative we really hear about the Hispanic community, that, oh, the smarter you are and the better you do in school as a Hispanic person, the less friends you have, right? This is something we really only hear about in the black community, when the data says that that is not what is happening. That's not an accurate way to describe it. If being dumber and doing worse in school equals being more popular in the black community, we would see the reflection of the white curve. We would see the black kid with a 1.0 GPA being the most popular, and it just being a downward slope as you get closer to 4.0. So that's bullshit, right? And that's a narrative that this guy is trying to ultimately push. That black American culture disincentivizes you from doing that. But the cherry on top of this guy's stupid Sunday, as the amazing Lucas would put it, was the fact that he did not even understand the conclusion of this paper. Listen to what he just said one more time.
The black Harvard researcher Roland Fryer put some numbers to this. He looked at 90,000 students and found that black kids with a grade point average over 3.5 lost friends.
Again, it's not that you lose friends, right? He's saying that you lose friends. That's not what the paper says. It's just that the black kid with a 4.0 is going to have less people consider him a friend than the black kid with a 3.5 GPA or a 3.6 GPA, right? This is what the data reveals. Why is that? Okay, we'll you would have to explore that further. But let's continue.
And that pattern occurred more frequently in mixed or integrated schools. It disappeared in schools that were over 80% black.
So he just debunked himself, right? He goes on to say this.
The pressure isn't coming from the white kids. That immigrant kid isn't losing white friends over his report card. He's losing black friends.
He completely misunderstands the data, right? He just said that in schools that are majority black, you don't see this pattern. You see it in schools where 20% of the population or less is black. In very mixed and diverse schools, this pattern completely disappears when you look at schools that are majority black. Let me show you that in the data. The most striking aspect of tables 5 and 6 is how the coefficient on acting white varies in arenas with more or less interracial contact. We partitioned a sample of schools in several ways. High versus low segregation schools where blacks and whites are the simple majority, and schools that are 80% black versus those that are 20% black. Remarkably, pay attention, schools that are less than 20% black have the largest acting white effect for blacks and Hispanics. What that means is that if you send your kid, if you're a black person and you send your kid to a mixed school, a school with a lot of diversity or a large white population, most importantly, a small minority black population, that is more than likely going to yield a situation where as your child performs better in school, they will have less friends. Whereas if you put them in a majority black school, or also interesting to observe, a private school, we don't see a similar effect. Whether you put them in a majority black school or a private school, as we can see here, we see the kid with a 4.0 GPA as a black, or yeah, the black kid. The kid with a 4.0 GPA in private school as a black person, they are the most popular of their peers, among their peers. Take a look at that. Take a look at that. This is the data. So if you send your black kid to a private school, the better he does in school from the data, the more likely he is to be popular. Here it says it explicitly in the paper. Surprisingly, blacks in more segregated schools incur less of a trade-off between social status and achievement. The coefficient on the acting white term is twice as large in schools that are above the median in terms of segregation. In addition, figure 4A and B, which estimate non-parametrically the social status grades relationship in high and low segregation schools, accounting for our core set of controls. This is what's important. Pay close attention to what it's about to say. Provides more evidence attesting to the fact that acting white is particularly salient among high achievers and those in schools with more interracial contact. So all that to say, the narrative he's trying to push that black kids try to disincentivize other black kids from doing well in school by ostracizing them as they get better grades, that you will lose friends as you get better grades, is completely false. Okay? You see this more in schools that are very interracial, that have a high degree of diversity when they're public. When they're private, you don't see this. So, not quite sure what's happening in the interracial, in the mixed, in the very diverse public school. But if you want your black child to do well academically, or at the very least, not worry about the idea that they are going to associate doing better in school with being less popular. And your kid's black, either A, put them in a majority black school, or B, put them in a private school, right? If you want to reduce the chances of that negative outcome happening. So that's really what this data says. And so this guy completely mishandled it. And so with that, I think the debunking of this video is complete. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace out.
Amazon offers hourly employees health care for $5 a week with $5 copays. When home is your gym, family hub, and office, your Wi-Fi can't stall out. Enter G-Fiber's Wi-Fi 7. Wi-Fi that flows faster and smarter with network traffic rules that work for you. G-Fiber Wi-Fi 7, the best Wi-Fi ever.
So this particular Monday, I'm doing what I normally do. I go to this gym, Main Street Boxing Gym, 1612 Austin Street. Yeah, I say that real bold. If anybody tried me, you know why I'm really at. So 1612 Austin Street is Main Street Gym. I'm in that gym every Monday. I get to town, I'm there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's when I'm there because I leave town on Thursday. Now this particular Monday, I walk into the gym, I'm having a pretty good day. And I get there at 5:30 a.m. Yeah, 5:30 a.m. in there doing my thing. Okay, so I walk in this particular Monday, and when I walked in, it's some guys already.
I'm gonna get mad, but I really don't give a damn. Governor of Mississippi, since we calling people out, let's call everybody out. Why the fuck aren't you calling these kids out when there are discrepancies in their stories? Why aren't you calling that man out for going on Nancy Grace and allegedly not standing on what he previously said? Why aren't you calling out the Mississippi State Police Department for the way this investigation has been handled? Why aren't you calling out the people responsible for keeping the public in an uproar? Because we still don't have any clear answers.
The police report just came out in the Nolan Wells case. And people all over the internet already starting to poke holes through the whole thing. They saying it's lies throughout the whole police report. Also, there's more video of Nolan Wells in the water. But it's a little snippet. I guess when you're in the water, you just pan your camera around, get your footage, and put your phone back up. But there is a little snippet of Nolan Wells in the water. I don't know what time of the day it was. But you know the other side going to say it was way past when his friends had left. But we don't know what time of the day it was. But let's get into these videos, y'all. Check it out.
Hey, Nolan Wells deniers. Why do you think that his friends told the cops that they didn't know the girl that he went with? Weird how in Warren's little interview he fails to mention that he spoke with the deputies and several friends claimed they didn't know the girl he left with. Right here, 1:30 in the morning, even though they were supposedly texting with Katie, right? Didn't get their story straight yet. Right there, in black and white, the boys lied. Or are we going to pretend that this isn't evidence too?
In the Bible, it says their pride has deceived them. And we all know pride comes before the fall. They are so used to getting away with certain things in their little city, they think that the world is going to go for it. And this is why he thinks he can go on these interviews like these people are going to believe me. No, these people are going to expose your ass.
People used to replace their windows with vinyl, which didn't last. Now, vinyl is being replaced with something scientifically proven to withstand.
This doesn't say anything, and I'm going to show y'all where they pointing at. We don't know the time this was, but that does look like Nolan Wells down here in the water. Right here, y'all. That looks like him. But that isn't saying anything. I don't know who this came from, but I'm sure Tatum is going to take this and say, see, look, this video is from after the friends had left. Then they're going to allegedly probably send it to TMZ. TMZ going to come out with their little articles and shit and try to spin the whole narrative. But like I said, God has the last word, y'all.
Oh, we have the Nolan Wells police report, and the friends have a little explaining to do. Just a heads up, this is just part one. This is a 15-page police report. For reference, here is the MDMR Marine Patrol police report. You can see the incident report directly up there. It is public record, so you guys can look it up. I want to point your attention to two specific areas of this report, starting right here. And here is the first discrepancy right here. Dispatch said that her 18-year-old son rode to Horn Island on a vessel with friends. He was last seen around $1,500. Here's the discrepancy. His phone was in a friend's truck. I'm sorry, I thought all the friends said that the phone was still in the boat. And the second discrepancy is right here. Lieutenant Karen said that his deputies had spoke with several friends and traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan, and they said that he left with the company of an unknown female. I'm sorry, what do you mean an unknown female? You all knew who Katie McCormick was and is. What do you mean an unknown female? You all knew exactly who he was on the island with. They were very clear about that. They knew who he was on the island with. But here they're saying, we don't know who she was. We know it was a girl, but we don't know who she was. All of a sudden, she went from having a name of Katie McCormick with all the recent media, covers that we've been seeing, but in the original police report, it was an unknown female. Remember, this is just part one.
Then I started to think, did the stepmother, who is a judge, coach them into not saying the name or mentioning Bart's name or Katie's name? Because as of late, we got the picture of Bart and Katie hugged up.
Wait a minute. The state of Mississippi is trying to reshape the narrative on the Nolan Wells death? Really? So it's been reported that Nolan Wells, witnesses have come forward to say that Nolan Wells was drinking heavily during the day of the 4th of July. As to say, that's why he drowned. Because remember, authorities have already come out and said, even before they did the autopsy, that Nolan Wells drowned. And his mother, Christine Watsley, said that was not good enough for her. That she needed a medical explanation as to what led up to those events of him. If they say drown, right? Now, let me ask y'all something. Was Nolan Wells the only one on Horn Island with his group of friends that was drinking? Let's go back through the evidence. Now, as you can see, the gentleman right next to Nolan Wells has beer dripping all down his chest. The other guy had a beer can in his hand. Now, these children are all under the age of 21. None of them can legally purchase alcohol except for Bart. Wait a minute. Bart, when you talk about the alcohol for the underage kids that day on the boat on Horn Island, was it you? Oh, this plot is just really thickening. Not to mention, if Nolan was drinking, if the toxicology come back and he did have alcohol, that doesn't negate the fact that something nefarious happened on that island. Just because Bart was drinking is going to lead to all these things that we see plain as day in our case. We're just going to bypass this, right? We also are going to forget the fact that allegedly they deleted everything off of their social media accounts. We're going to not think about, oh, Nolan was drinking, so now they got to, if Nolan was drinking, why everybody got a lawyer up? Why everybody got an attorney? And if Nolan was heavily drinking on the 4th of July, we just got to forget the fact that the telephone call for the tip line was routed to Judge Ashley Cole's office instead of going to the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. Really? Yeah, all these things cannot be coincidental. We're going to negate the fact that now Governor Tate Reeves is coming out trying to assault Ben Crump's character, calling him a bold-faced lie. Really? We're just going to negate the fact that the Sheriff's Department, the day of, right when they pulled Nolan Wells' body out of the water, stated it was a drowning. Are you serious? I just want to know this. With those children who were drinking, nobody is drawing attention to that. And even if Nolan was drunk on the 4th of July, that does not give anybody a pass to do anything harmful to him or take his life because he was drunk. And it does not fall on him. That does not make him responsible for leaving here. It's y'all fault. Now, what y'all boys out there on Ocean Springs out there hiding and you got your parents involved? What's really going on down there?
But she has been cooking she deserves some follows, y'all. I don't know if she have a YouTube, but she is on TikTok as Kimmy's World. Y'all go support this sister, y'all. But I find it very suspicious that the tip line phone number goes straight to the judge. And it makes me believe that what they're doing with those tips is nothing.
I know I'm supposed to be working, but I had to stop to tell y'all this. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump has sent out litigation letters to each and every person who was around Nolan Wells during his disappearance. And these letters are warning them that they are to keep every single text message, Snapchat, photo, cooler, any evidence that could be used in this case. And if you ask me, those kids should have already been arrested and detained until we have answers, but at least this attorney is taking the necessary steps to try to preserve any evidence. I know they're trying to spin this narrative that Nolan was drunk, but baby, Warren already messed that up when he said that Nolan was fine. This media blitz that people like Warren and Tristan are out here doing isn't working in the public. We don't believe it. And that smear campaign that TMZ is on, we definitely don't believe that one. These kids may have lawyered up already and deleted their social media, but baby, let me tell you, all of that is going to be retrieved. And when this case gets cracked, they are going to be held.
The Molly method is here at Molly Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, and we're excited to invest in our new team, new facility, and community. And during the Make This the Summer sales event, get real deals like new Grand Cherokees with over 11 grand in savings, and new Ram 1500s, 0% plus no payments. No unnecessary add-ons, no fake rebates. Just new owners with a new way of doing things. Experience the Molly method today at Molly Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram.
Well, I've been here since kindergarten, and now I'm graduating 12th grade. My family traveled a lot, and it became tough at times to get all my work in and so forth. My teachers were wonderful, and they were able to assist me along the way, and you have the opportunity to do whatever you want to do. Everybody says it, but you can really do that in online school.
Held liable.
The number one and the main reason why I'm not going to believe that there's a timeline saying that 18-year-old Nolan Wills was truly seen after 6 p.m. is because we have not heard that from 18-year-old Nolan Wills' mom. At least I have not seen that. If anybody's seen that from 18-year-old Nolan Wills' mom, that she posted that there's a new sighting after 6 p.m. that's been confirmed to be 18-year-old Nolan Wills, please let me know where that's at. But if you have not seen that, then I don't believe it. Because Nolan Wells' mom has done a wonderful job with letting everybody know about that timeline, saying, hey, there's a picture that we believe is Nolan after 4:34 p.m. So anytime that she received any new details that she felt like it may have really been 18-year-old Nolan Wells, she's came out and added that timeline so everybody will have that timeline. So therefore, people will start looking for times after that time to see if they saw 18-year-old Nolan Wells. And again, it still doesn't make any sense if Lucas is allegedly that person that said that he saw 18-year-old Nolan Wells after 6 p.m. Due to the fact that inside of that same clip that he did his interview, we saw Jay Vine in there as if they're alleging that Jay Vine rode with Lucas to and from the island. So if Jay Vine did ride with Lucas to and from the island, how would he then still be on the island at 6 p.m. if Jay Vine was said to leave before 5 p.m.? In fact, somebody came out and said that they were Jay Vine's ride and that Jay Vine left the island with them, and it was shortly after 4. But then you have Ivy Elizabeth stating that Jay Vine Williams had stayed on their boat checking on Tracy and Shepard allegedly till close to time for them to leave, which was around 5 p.m. Also, I don't believe Lucas. You can believe Lucas if you would like to believe Lucas, in my personal opinion. He's a liar. In my personal opinion, he's only came out and said the things that he said to try to help to cover up for somebody else. Yes, absolutely. I could be wrong. This is just my opinion. And I want everybody to remember that this is my opinion. And I truly don't believe that they have any eyewitnesses of 18-year-old Nolan Wells after 6 p.m.
From the very first moment that the search for Nolan Wells began and everyone was looking for answers, why in the hell These two people allegedly are the witnesses. Wait 20-something days later to say that they saw Nolan Wells after 6 p.m. It doesn't make sense, and I remember people do get paid off to say things, allegedly.
I'm gonna get mad, but I really don't give a damn. Governor of Mississippi, since we calling people out, let's call everybody out. If we're gonna call Ben Crump out, then why the fuck aren't you calling these kids out when there are discrepancies in their stories? Why aren't you calling that man out for going on Nancy Grace and allegedly not standing on what he previously said? Why aren't you calling out the Mississippi State Police Department for the way this investigation has been handled? Why aren't you calling out the people responsible for keeping the public in an uproar? Because we still don't have any clear answers. Because if the principle is going to be the same for Big Crump, then that principle needs to be the same across the goddamn board. You don't get to shine a flashlight on somebody else and then turn that motherfucker off when it gets to you. Look in the mirror. You are the governor. You lead by example. So if you got so much to say about what somebody else is doing, then tell us what the fuck is going on with the questions we have. Where is the autopsy information? What happened to the throat tissue? What information can you give this family about the findings? Why was the public not giving clear explanations about these issues sooner? And why the hell are we listening to an audio recording where people are allegedly calling for help, but the audio is so unclear that we're still sitting here trying to figure out what the fuck was happening? Make that shit make sense. Because you can't demand accountability from one person while everybody else gets the goddamn pass. That's not accountability. That's selective accountability. And until I hear answers to the questions that this family and this public have been asking, I don't want to hear shit about Ben Crump. At least he's over there trying to get answers for this family. So, Governor, if you want to call somebody out, call everybody out. Call your own people out. Call the agencies out. Call the people whose stories don't line up out. And then come back and tell us what the fuck happened to Nolan Wells. Because that's what the hell we want to know.
For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God, to the pulling down of strongholds. The news just came out and try to back up everything that TMZ was saying. They try to come out and lean on Nolan Wells was drunk and stayed at the island. These are strongholds that we're going to need God for. All my prayer warriors, all my spiritual people, hell, if you don't even believe in the Most High and you support Nolan Wells, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to meditate. But for all my prayer warriors, y'all get in that closet, y'all know what to do. Because these people are working day and night, losing sleep, trying to figure out how they're going to wiggle their way through this and blame Nolan Wells for his own unaliving. But we know what the hell is up. They even had a nerve on ABC to play the audio.
A great deal or more safety. Why choose? Mazda has been awarded more 2026 IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than any other brand as of June 2026, and has been named Consumer Reports' safest new car brand. Right now, you can drive one home for less at the More to Move You sales event. Mazda, more for you.
Take advantage of this exceptional offer during the More to Move You sales event.
Hello?
And chop out the parts where we heard what we heard in the background. These are the strongholds, y'all. These people have a stronghold on us because most people think when they come out and say something, most people take it as facts. Why? Because they have white man Christ in their head. Because they have a white man God in their head. So when they see white people on the news saying something, they take it as a fact. These are the strongholds that we must cast down, y'all. And we don't have to use weapons. Why? Because God is on our side. Y'all get in the comment section. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this police report. Y'all get in the comment section. Y'all let me know what y'all think about our sisters supporting their brothers, because this is what they don't want. They want for us to continue with the gender war. They do not want our sisters standing up for our brothers, because they know when that happens, it's a wrap. They cannot stand our sisters snapping on their ass. That irritates them. When our sisters stand up and start snapping, they hate that shit. That would drive them the hell away. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this new video of Nolan Wells in the water. You know they want to say that that's after 6 p.m., right? They want to say that's well after when Nolan Wells' fake friends had left, right? But that ain't going to do nothing. Everything that they're coming out with, trust me, God is going to make a way where though they're going to have to eat every word, y'all.
This is Professor Stefano Mancuso. For over 30 years, he has been studying plant behavior, and much of his work is centered around what he calls plant intelligence. When you first hear this, you're probably thinking that this sounds absurd. After all, plants don't even have brains or anything that even resembles a nervous system. So how could they possibly have any form of intelligence? Yet through decades of experiments, he has found that plants are able to actively sense their surroundings and adjust their behavior depending on what information they received. He has even found evidence of their capacity to learn. Now at this point, most people will probably be quite skeptical, because how do you even go about proving any of this? Well, let's take a look together at how all of this first began. For as far as Stefano could remember, he grew up in a world full of plants. And not just full in the conventional sense, but rather his entire house was flooded with plants, where space for everything else was very limited. This was largely thanks to his mother, who absolutely loved plants. And growing up in this weird world, he slowly began developing an interest for them too. At school, when teachers showed photos of different animals, other kids would ask about lions or elephants, but he was always curious about the walls and walls of plants in every photo. The plants that no one else seemed to see. This fascination stayed with him into college, where he began to study plants seriously. And the more he studied them, the more he was fascinated by how they lived alongside us, yet seemed to exist in a completely different world. And as he was studying for his doctorate, Stefano came across descriptions of how plant roots were said to navigate obstacles underground. The literature at the time mentioned that a root would first run into an obstacle, then slowly feel its way around it in a series of little jumps. This may not seem fascinating to others, but it absolutely captivated him, and he wanted to set up an experiment to study this phenomenon. Little did he know, this experiment would change his perspective on plants forever. So next, let's take a look together at what he found.
Nintendo Switch 2 has exclusive games like Pokemon Pokopia. So you can play your...
What he found. Stefano's experiment began with a very simple design. He would first place a large obstacle in the soil before planting the seed of a bean plant directly on top. Next, he would wait for the roots to grow while taking notes of what he saw. As the days passed, the roots grew closer and closer to the barrier, and just as he thought he was about to see them come into contact, something unexpected happened. The roots started growing sideways long before they encountered any kind of physical resistance. And this made him very angry, because he wanted to observe the little jumps and he couldn't figure out what he had done wrong. And so he repeated the experiment again, and again, and again. Over hundreds of experiments, he tried different materials, different depths, and yet the roots always seemed to avoid the obstacle before ever encountering it. Until one day, it occurred to him that maybe he had been thinking about this all wrong.
A un certo punto è stata una specie di illuminazione. Ho detto, ma non vedrò mai i saltelli, perché la radice conosce, sa dov'è l'ostacolo. E quindi non fa questa cosa che io sto cercando di vedere, ma gira prima. E in effetti è quello che fa una radice.
It was in this moment that he truly fell in love with plants. And he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to what plants were capable of than we gave them credit for. Over the next several years, Stefano spent long stretches in the lab running experiment after experiment, watching and learning how plants responded to the world around them. And the more he studied them, the harder it became to see them as just passive things. He found that plants can detect pathogens and pick up signals from their environment in ways we barely notice. Then one day, whilst he was observing a parasitic plant called the cuscuta slowly reach for its host, he saw something that felt strangely familiar. The plant seemed to move as though it already had some sense of where the host was, even before making contact. And that brought him back to the same mystery from his doctoral work. How could a plant know what was around it without any of the senses we normally rely on, like sight or touch? This time, he decided to pursue this further and see how far it really went. See, in previous situations, one could argue that perhaps the host plant was giving off chemical signals, or that the roots were simply responding to conditions in the soil. So what happens when you remove both those possibilities? He began by placing the seed of a bean plant in a small pot at the center of his lab. Next, he would place a metal support a few meters away. If the plant had no idea of its surroundings, then it should search randomly around the room. But let's take a look together at what he found. This is footage from Stefano's lab. The footage is sped up over several days, but you can see that rather than searching randomly, the bean plant seems to have a very good idea of where the support is. And if you look closely, the tip of the bean shoot has also preemptively formed into a hook-like shape, and all of this has happened before ever making physical contact.
And at the try, it's not enough. And you can almost feel the effort. And look at the leaves now, that the original code, how is much quiet, calm. Anyway, so we know that the bean is aware of the pole, okay?
Over the next few weeks, Stefano repeated the experiment time and time again. He would try moving the support to different locations in the room, but each time the bean plants always seemed to know where the support was. And before long, a more complex question began to take shape in his mind. Were the plants only detecting where the nearest support was, or were they perhaps capable of even more? See, in the wild, plants are rarely alone, so would their behavior change if there were other plants nearby? So for his next experiment, he decided to place two plants side by side with a support beam in between. If the plants were just detecting the nearest support they could find, then they should both grab onto the beam. But let's take a look at what Stefano found. The first phase is what Stefano calls the sensing phase, where they begin to detect what's in their surroundings. Once they realize there's a pole, they quickly try to move towards it, but pay very close attention to what happens with the first plant reaching the pole. Rather than latching on, the second plant suddenly changes direction instead.
If you can repeat this experiment 100 times, and 100 times you will get the same result. So this means that the second plant is not just aware of the support, it's also aware of another plant, and is aware of what the other plant is able to do.
He would later repeat this experiment with plants that were either related or unrelated, and what he found was that when the plants weren't related, the one that lost would typically search for alternatives before giving up eventually. While if they were related, the two plants would instead share the support beam together. This type of kinship behavior has also been found in similar studies across different plants by other scientists. This suggests that they are not only aware of what's in their surroundings, but are actively altering their behavior based on the broader context of the situation itself. Now, this is pretty amazing, right? And when Stefano realized this, he started to think about what all of this really meant. Because if plants were altering their behavior based on complex contextual information, is it possible that they may even have some form of intelligence? Intelligence. As the days went by, this question kept coming up in Stefano's mind. And one day, as he was thinking about what intelligence really meant, he came across a talk by theoretical physicist Toshio Kaku, who described learning as one of the clearest signs of intelligence. And that's when he had an idea. He wanted to try and teach a plant something new. For this experiment, he decided to use a plant called Mimosa pudica. These plants have a very unique defense mechanism. When physically disturbed, they will rapidly close their leaves in response. So Stefano wanted to see if he could get the Mimosa pudica plants to stop reacting to a stimulus that had previously considered to be dangerous. To test this, the plants were first placed in small containers mounted on the vertical rail. They would then be lifted to a height of around 15 centimeters, which was the distance that had already been shown to reliably trigger leaf closure without actually harming the plant. Next, he would drop the plants from this height and observe their behavior. And sure enough, the plants would quickly close their leaves as expected. He would then wait for the plant to reopen its leaves before repeating this again. By around the fifth or sixth time, he already started noticing a change in how the plants would respond, with some plants beginning to reopen their leaves more quickly. And the more he did this, the more the response from the plants weakened, and eventually they stopped closing their leaves altogether.
La prima volta che cade la pianta si spaventa e chiude tutte le foglie. Poi passa un po' di tempo e si riapre e noi la facevamo ricadere e di nuovo si chiudeva. Si riapriva le foglie e di nuovo la facevamo cadere. Dopo 4 o 5 volte la pianta capisce che non è pericoloso quello stimolo e non si chiude più. Ha imparato a distinguere fra uno stimolo pericoloso e uno stimolo non pericoloso.
Now, those of you who are perceptive might think, well, maybe the plants were just exhausted from closing their leaves so many times. Stefano thought the same thing. So after dropping them hundreds of times, he immediately introduced them to a second, slightly different stimulus. Instead of dropping them, he would shake the container lightly instead, and this time the plants immediately closed their leaves. Stefano believed that the reason why they are able to learn so quickly is because closing their leaves not only takes a lot of energy, it also reduces the amount of light they're able to absorb. So being able to learn and differentiate between how dangerous different stimuli are would give them a clear survival advantage in nature. But this raises a bigger question. If the reason for their behavior is based on their need for light, would their ability to learn vary if they were raised in different environments? So for his next experiment, Stefano would raise one group of plants in a low light setting and the other with bright light. He would then put them through the same training, and what he found was very interesting. The group that was raised in the low light environment would learn to reopen their leaves much quicker than those in the high light environment. This suggests that in environments where resources are scarce, the cost of closing the leaves becomes much higher, making it more critical to be able to quickly differentiate when a stimulus was actually harmless. He would later switch the environments for the two groups and let them sit for a while before testing them again. He suspected that the plants would be able to quickly adapt to their new environment and exhibit the behaviors that the previous group did. But what he found was even more interesting. Because while this was the case for the group that was raised in bright light, this wasn't the case for the low light group who instead retained their learned behavior. And this is fascinating because their learned behavior still proves to be especially useful in the new environment because it now affords maximum foraging opportunity, and it suggests that the plants were able to distinguish between which learned behaviors would continue to be useful. And not just that, they were able to retain these learnings for almost 2 months.
Dopodiché, quando ha imparato che quello stimolo non è pericoloso, noi abbiamo preso le piante, le abbiamo messe in una serra e le abbiamo lasciate 2 mesi. Siamo tornati dopo 2 mesi, le abbiamo sottoposte allo stesso stimolo e la pianta non si chiudeva ancora, cioè ricordava la lezione.
Stefano's research showed that plants not only have some form of memory, but are even able to learn and quickly adapt their behavior to different stimuli. But here's the thing, plants don't have brains. So what exactly was making this possible? And as Stefano pondered this question, he wondered if they may have some kind of internal system, similar to our own, that was allowing them to perform these complex behaviors.
At Amazon, hourly employees earn an average of over $23 an hour.
Super Cruise Driver Assistance Tech lets you go hands off on your time off.
Complex behaviors. All his life, Stefano had been told that plants were just responding reactively to the world around them. Yet his research findings over the years had shown him something very different. From their ability to detect and change their actions based on what was around them, and even their ability to learn, all of it pointed to the idea that there was something far more complex inside these organisms. And that's when he had a crazy idea. In animals, anesthetic can temporarily shut down the processes that allow an organism to perceive and respond to its surroundings. So what happens if you give anesthetic to a plant? In this experiment, he needed plants that would give up a clear visual signal in response to stimuli, and he chose 5 different plants. We'll mainly focus on our friend the Mimosa and the biggest flytrap, but all the plants end up having similar results. Let's first take a look at how the plants respond before any anesthetic is applied. This is the actual footage from the experiments that Stefano ran, and you can see that both the Mimosa and the biggest flytrap respond almost immediately when they're touched. Next, he would create an anesthetic solution and have this slowly evaporate and be absorbed by the plants in a gas container. And then came the most important part. If the way plants work was anything like animals, then they should no longer respond to stimuli. And when he tested this, that's exactly what he found. In this instance, despite being touched repeatedly, the plants don't have any response. Finally, he would remove the gas container and leave the plants alone to see if they would recover over time. And it turns out that different plants would take different amounts of time to fully recover. He later finds that their speed of recovery seems to be directly correlated to their ability to produce action potentials, which are brief electrical signals that cells use to transmit information. The same type of signals that animals use to transmit information through the nervous system. This suggests that how plants function may be far more similar to us, other animals, and Stefano believes that they may even have some form of consciousness itself.
Nelle piante di sicuro non sappiamo dove. Come la si definisce? Non lo sappiamo cosa sia la coscienza, sappiamo però che è una cosa che perdiamo quando siamo sotto anestesia o quando dormiamo. In questi 2 momenti noi non siamo coscienti. Allora la cosa interessante è che le piante possono essere anestetizzate, cioè funzionano gli stessi anestetici che funzionano negli animali funzionano nelle piante e dormono, cioè hanno un ciclo giorno-notte esattamente come il nostro.
Stefano has often wondered for 2 narrow-minded about how we perceive intelligence. For a very long time, we have tended to associate intelligence with things that feel familiar to us. We try to look for a brain or the ability to make choices that look visible and immediate. And in doing so, we assume that if something is truly intelligent, then it must act in ways that resemble us. But plants suggest another possibility, that life can solve problems in slower, quieter ways. They don't display traditional signs of intelligence like birds or dolphins, and yet they've survived on this planet for hundreds of millions of years. They've helped build the very atmosphere we breathe, they've even learned to harvest light, and have cooperated with fungi and bacteria to turn a once hostile world into one that can sustain life, like ours. To Stefano, that is hard to describe as anything less than intelligence. and over time he came to feel that this was too important to remain locked away in scientific papers read only by other specialists. He wanted to bring this hidden world of plants into public view, which is why he began writing and speaking more publicly about his research. He has even helped build and popularize the field of plant neurobiology, and in doing so has become one of the most outspoken and controversial public voices. Some critics felt he was going too far, that his language was too provocative and too willing to blur the line between plants and animals. But perhaps Stefano's point was never really about whether plants were intelligent in the way that animals are, but rather if we had made ourselves incapable of seeing intelligence in any form that did not resemble our own. Because when Stefano looks out into the forest, he sees a vast, wide intelligence in our world. A world that has been sensing and evolving all around us for far longer than we have been here to notice it. And that is part of why Stefano believes we would be wise to learn from plants. Because if one day we hope to build a more sustainable future, whether here on Earth or somewhere far beyond it, then perhaps we should pay more attention to the very organisms that have already spent hundreds of millions of years learning how to survive in the most difficult places. So the next time you walk through a forest, or a garden, or even just watering your own plants at home, it may be worth looking closely. Because the world around us may be far more active and alive than we know to see.
Don't look down. In Rooftop Run, every jump is a heart-pounding rate.
See up close, and even very, very close, nature takes on a whole other dimension. Our eyes delight in the finesse of a branch. We marvel at the delicate nature of a flower. Beneath trees, we are prone to dream. If we could look much closer and plunge into the intimacy of plant life, we would discover a disturbing yet stunning complexity. This green chaos, covered with what looks like the eyes of snails, is in reality the surface of the leaf of an ordinary tree, enlarged hundreds of times through digital 3D microscopes. Today, scientific imagery enables us to see plants like never before, and we find in awe that the world of plants remains largely a mystery to us. Humans have several common points with plants. They have a vascular system similar to our veins and arteries, which ensures fluid circulation. Plants have an electric network resembling our nerves, through which information travels. Plants secrete hormones, and other points of similarity could be revealed. On the other hand, without a heart or brain, absolutely essential for us, plants throughout their evolution have developed some extremely original solutions for survival, solutions we could learn from. Stefano Mancuso, a professor at the University of Florence in Italy, founded over 10 years ago the first international laboratory of vegetal neurobiology, which studies the interactions between plants and their environment.
Plants are able to sense the environment in an exquisite way. They are much more sensitive than animals, and they need to be more sensitive because they cannot run away from the danger.
Plants are rooted to the ground. This forced sedentary nature has steered their sensorial organization to become accurate and highly efficient.
Sensitivity is not something that is linked to a brain. The brain in itself, it's a stupid organ. It's just an amount of cells that we have here and every animal have. There is nothing mysterious or supernatural about the cells of our brains. They are just a specific kind of cells called neurons. But you don't need neurons to make this stuff. You can have all other kind of cells having the same function. So it means transmitting signals from one cell to the other.
Humans must react instantly to their environment, especially when confronted with danger. The transmission of nerve impulses spread throughout our nervous system at a speed of 100 meters a second. Do plants need such rapid connections? To calculate the speed of electric signals in a plant, Bruno Moulier and his team from the French National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and the Environment, INRAE, is placing electrodes on the stem of a shrub.
The friction here has triggered an electric current which spreads throughout the plant. It weakens at roughly 20 centimeters. When the plant receives a gust of wind or an insect bite, there are two signals that spread throughout the plant. An electric signal over some dozens of centimeters and a hydraulic signal that can even travel to the roots.
Our national security has been compromised. Lioness targets could be released publicly.
Mr. Team, they have your phone, Mr. Team, they have everything. I got flamethrowers behind us. I'm not even cut them off.
Move.
Applebee's 2 for $25 is taking your taste buds on a trip. With one full-size appetizer like the new bacon cheeseburger wonton tacos. And 2 entrees for only $25. Only at Applebee's.
The conduction speed of the electric impulse, seen in this image highly accelerated, is only 6 to 8 centimeters per minute. This slower conduction speed is logical with the sedentary life of plants. To create the organic matter required for growth, a plant needs light, provided by the sun, carbon dioxide, present in the atmosphere, and water. Light is absorbed through chlorophyll, the tiny round globes contained in plant cells. Thanks to chlorophyll, light, water, and carbon dioxide are transformed into sugars, which the plant feeds on. This process, known as photosynthesis, releases oxygen. The procedure seems simple, but in everyday life, plants are regularly confronted with vital problems. Water is capricious, and plants don't want too much or too little, and it must fall at the right time. Roots seize the water in the soil through a large number of little hairs. Under lack of water, roots are the first to perceive the threat and action the close of the stomata. Stomata are little mouth-like pores spread over the leaves. It is through these that the plant breathes and releases the water vapor produced by photosynthesis. When roots send the signal, lack of water, the stomata pores shrink. The plant captures less carbon dioxide and reduces growth. Daniel Charlotans, a botanical genetics scientist, discovered a gene in the hairs of plants that is similar to those responsible for the vibrating hairs in the inner ear of humans. From a genetic point of view, plants have the same genes that are needed for hearing that animals have. This gene in animals is a gene which enables the hairs of our inner ears to be formed, and these are the hairs that vibrate the sound waves. These are genes that are needed for us to hear. Plants have essentially the same genes, which might lead us to think that plants hear the same way. But when we look more in depth at what these genes do, they're necessary for forming of hairs at the tips of roots. But these hairs apparently are not listening, but they're necessary for the roots to absorb water. So while the genes cause the same structures to be formed, hairs, in humans it's needed for hearing, and in plants it's needed for drinking.
This unexpected proximity fascinates and drives Ivana Marquita. We are quite sure that plants are able to use the information obtaining from the sounds in the soil, for example, to detect the quality of the soils, the amount of water in the soils, the presence of obstacles in the soil. So they are in some way using information obtaining from the sounds to have an idea of the space around them. So just put a loudspeaker close to these roots, and you will see that if the frequencies are in the range between 100 to 1000 hertz, the roots will turn toward the source of the frequency. If the frequencies are higher than 5000, the roots will grow against the source of the sound.
One of the Tasmanian gardens was once thought to dance to music. Today's fact, it moves its leaves towards the zone that gets the most light. Some may say that plants do better and grow quicker when their favourite music is played.
What is important for plants is not the music, but are the frequencies. We found that there are a range of frequencies in the low part of the spectrum, between 100 and 1000 hertz. There are many frequencies that we could say plants like. They are completely insensitive to the quality of this classical rock, blues, and so on of the music. But they are able to detect specific frequencies.
There is one sound which humans find disturbing. It's the whining of a mosquito in the dark. Could plants be aware of the buzzing of insects? In Israel, and in the global scientific community,
The work of Lila Cadney is making a buzz. Her research backs up the idea that plants identify the sounds made by pollinators and take advantage of this.
What's all the fuss about G-Fiber Internet? Fast is just the beginning. Loved for its great Wi-Fi, award-winning app, and calls answered in seconds. Now with Wi-Fi 7, free custom install, and battery backup. G-Fiber. Finally internet you may actually love.
Flowers produce nectar with the sole aim of attracting pollinators that feed on the sugars it contains. By harvesting the nectar, pollinators bring pollen from other flowers, and this pollen fertilizes the flower they visit.